Good afternoon and welcome to Not Minding My Own Business. My name is Russell Farbiars, and I am pleased to be joined here today uh, by Anne Desjardins. Did I get that right?
Desjardins. Close.
Desjardins. I'm sorry about that. I was practicing before we got on the call, but of course I didn't get it quite perfect. But welcome, Anne. Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, Anne, can you tell me a little bit about, we'll start with your line of work, but then I also know that you have some volunteer work that you do that we want to talk about.
Yeah. So me in a nutshell, I sell folding cartons for a living. I work for a company called Paperworks, and I've been with them about 3.5 years now. I love what I do. I work with a lot of different manufacturers, which is so fun for me to get out there and see how different things are made, different ways that I can make somebody's life better through the products that we provide. And what I love so much in particular about our company is that we make our own recycled board out of trash. So for me, I'm really into sustainability and I really care about the environment and the earth. And so it's just another way that is part of my life. And I'm intricately tied to that. And I do appreciate that about my company so much. We're the third largest vertically integrated supplier in North America. And so we're positioned nicely to service from small to large size accounts. And I really love what I do with that bit because it's never the same pace. It's never the same thing twice. And so for somebody like me, that's just a really good fit. And I'm helping people, which then leads to the other part of my life in terms of helping people. It's always been a passion of mine and something I feel very strongly about. And so I can remember there was a moment in time when I was trying to figure out a good purpose for me to do. And I was like, maybe I'll work with the Children's Network and try to help people who have children who are close to dying or have a chronic illness and try to help make their life a little bit better. And then I think it was the very next day I got my diagnosis with Lyme disease and I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks God. I didn't necessarily need it hit to me that hard, but I'll take it. And so, my journey with Lyme disease was a really long road to walk. And once I started to feel better and my brain started to work again, is really when I became much more passionate with the volunteer work that I can do. And so I started a support group for Berks County through PA Lyme Resource Network as my parent organization. But I started that chapter now, I guess, probably 3 or 4 years ago. Time goes so fast. And then I became a public prevention specialist. So I can actually go out to different groups and community organizations, companies, and talk to them. We have a very extensive PowerPoint presentation I can give, or I can also do something a little less lengthy, depending on how much education people really want to get about ticks and Lyme disease. And then I really have just become an advocate myself. I started to do videos on social media called Quick Tick Tips. And then now I've started to do stuff with TikToks on TikTok. Yeah. So here we go again. I'm trying something new. But really whatever I can do to help get the word out there. And there's so many of us, people often hear my story and how long it took to get a diagnosis. And they typically, I think, feel sorry for me. And it's like, well, that's nice, but I'm one of millions who have that same exact story. And that's another reason why I choose to do my best to bring some awareness to this problem.
Sure. And I hope it's okay with you if we get into your story a little bit, because I think it'd be helpful to our listeners to understand where your passion comes from.
Yeah.
So now, when were you diagnosed with Lyme disease?
Actually, I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary of my diagnosis with Lyme disease, so August 4th in 2017. But it took me 7 years prior to that to get to that point in time.
What kind of symptoms started to develop that gave you some concern?
Well, I think at the beginning of my 30s, I had gone through somewhat of a traumatic event. And for people that follow me, I'm pretty vocal in how I feel like my spiritual health was in shambles, which led to my physical health going downhill. But initially, I started to have an incredible fatigue that was like nothing I can really conceptualize for normal people. It crippled me. It made it very difficult to go, to get up, to do anything. I can remember sitting on the couch just crying because I couldn't get up and go see my friends or my family. I had a weird sensation in the left side of my face that would be there only certain days. I started to have memory problems. I joke about GPS and how much that saved my life because sometimes I couldn't remember where I was going. If it was something like the grocery store, it was terrible. And then I'd stutter sometimes when I was talking. I started to have a lot more of an emotional spectrum problem. I don't really know how else to refer to that, but I'd cry a lot. I'd be angry a lot. I'd have a lot of OCD, a lot of trust issues, a lot of the negative spectrum emotions I feel were very heightened in me through that time. I started to get hives. They told me I was allergic to my own sweat. I had night sweats. I had insomnia. You know, I just didn't feel well all the time. And so I started to get tested for different things. I went to a lot of different doctors. I thought maybe I had sleep apnea because a lot of times the fatigue would hit in the afternoon. So I thought maybe I was having problems digesting my lunch or maybe it was again like the apnea. I couldn't tell you what was wrong, but there was just a lot of things that were coming in my head that was like, okay. So I got tested for apnea. I didn't have that, but then there were some weird abnormalities with my brain pattern that they wanted me to stay the next day to do a nap study where you do 5 naps for 20 minutes apiece. And in 3 out of the 5 naps, I went into REM within the first 5 minutes, which is apparently pretty abnormal. So they told me I had narcolepsy, which actually, now that I know a lot more about Lyme and what it does to your brain, it actually causes your brain to become inflamed, and the pattern of your brain surface is generally smooth, but it can make it scalloped and have a lot of ridges, which somewhat appears like what narcolepsy looks like. So I could see they weren't, I guess, too far off base with that, but I knew that wasn't right. I went on a shift sleep disorder stimulant that cost a lot of money, that didn't do anything for me. And then I got screened for a ton of allergies. That was really not very productive of an exercise. They tested my thyroid. They looked at my white blood cell count, and there were little tweaks and things that were off. Like they sent my thyroid results out to a specialist to look at, and he actually said everything was fine, although it was slightly off. And I understand now too that Lyme attacks our thyroid. It attacks all of our organs. And so I actually had a lot of benign nodules around my thyroid, and that was my organ trying to protect itself from the illness. But all this is in hindsight, right? And so going into this, I didn't know all of this, and I see a lot of different doctors, and I'd beg any medical person, my gynecologist, I'd sit there and cry, and I'd just be like, I'm so tired, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I think because I cried a lot of times too, I was somewhat dismissed, and many times I was told I was too stressed, and that I needed to change my lifestyle. And so that began that whole crusade of starting to meditate and do different herbal supplements to try to help with stress. And I changed pretty much every physical chemical product that I could think of, from my laundry detergent. I stopped taking birth control. I just couldn't understand what was possibly interfering with me so much to make me feel so unwell. And then ultimately, like I was even standing on a piece of tinfoil to dissipate electromagnetic frequencies because I thought they were radiating my brain, and that was what was wrong with me. Like I was getting desperate, and doctors again just kept telling me that there was nothing wrong with me. So for so many times of hearing that from a medical person, you're just like, okay, I guess there's nothing wrong with me. And then my battle starts with God, and I'm like, God, why did you make me so screwed up? This is so hard. Like I feel so sick all the time. I don't see how people are functioning as humans. Like, how do they have a family? How do they have kids? I can hardly get out of bed and do my laundry and feed myself. I don't understand here. And I mean, there was a time I couldn't even go into church. I was just so mad at God. Like I couldn't even go. And then I started to drink a lot because I just felt so unwell, and no one believed me that there was something wrong with me. So that's what I did for a while. For like the next 3 years, I just drank heavily, and that was really not a good space to be in. But I couldn't even watch TV anymore. I couldn't remember what I was watching at the commercials. Like it was just a pointless endeavor to really even try to function. I'm grateful that I could still work. I'm a salesperson, and so like I'd have my trusty journal with me, like write down everything every person said to me so that I could remember what I was doing to be able to pay my bills and do my job. But that's about the only thing that I could do for a really long time. And It's sad. It's like you become a living, breathing zombie. And I certainly don't feel sorry for myself. I'm very grateful for my experiences because they've helped make me a much more evolved human. But in conjunction with all the Lyme stuff going on, I'd like to mention also that I had a lot of co-infections. People often don't really understand about co-infections, but I had more than one sickness that the tick gave me. Woohoo. And then, through that whole journey, I was battling near cervical cancer because I feel that my immune system had been so taxed or completely shut down that my body was just left open to bad pathogens and things of opportunistic times when your good health isn't there to fight it off. So it's been very insightful, and it has definitely changed me for the better as a human, but it was a very long, lonely existence. And it breaks my heart for people going through it because I understand it and I've been there. And I think about kids, and they're the hardest hit population, are children, by the way. And I'm a grown up and I have the words to tell people how I felt, and they still didn't believe me or do anything about it. So I think about a child, and they don't necessarily even have the vocabulary to express how they're feeling in their little bodies. Like, how do they manage through this?
Yeah, it sounds like it was incredibly frustrating to constantly hear, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you." It makes you feel like that you're just making it up, except you're not making it up. And it's great that you were able to be an advocate for yourself and persevere, but not everyone has that temerity to do that. Uh, is there not adequate testing for Lyme disease, or what makes it so hard for that diagnosis to be made?
Wow. Well, there's a lot of reasons. So the testing is highly inadequate. It's about 45-year-old technology that we're still utilizing for diagnostic testing, which is only 50 to 65% accurate. That's a huge problem. How are you diagnosing somebody with a test that you have a better chance maybe of flipping a coin at getting your predicted outcome? That's terribly offensive. Secondly, a lot of doctors unfortunately don't know enough about it. And so many of them feel like, oh, you can't possibly have Lyme disease. You didn't have the bullseye rash, or you didn't have blah, blah, blah. Well, I'd like to say only 35% of people get a bullseye rash. The rest of us don't even have any idea that we've been bit. And so Lyme disease has been found in every continent, every country, every state, every city, every place on this planet. And so for a doctor to sit there and say that we don't have this in our area is not, they're not educated. They don't know, because it's in every area. And I think that's, again, a lot of the problem. Thirdly, there seems to be some type of political undercurrent to it, in that doctors in the past have been penalized for treating patients the way that they feel that patients should be treated. And so versus what the CDC says for a standard criteria that, 100% certainty you've tested positive, there are cases that fall between that don't necessarily have that 100% certainty to the CDC's criteria. And so a lot of times, if you are getting tested, you actually get a positive result. They say that you don't actually have it because you're only testing positive to 4 out of 5 bands that test looks for. And so back in the early 2000s, there's so many things I'm trying to get out about this. Back in the early 2000s, they put a vaccine out on the market that evidently supposedly started to give people Lyme disease, so they had to take it off the market. But when they put that out on the market, they took out some of the screenings that they were using in the test, because that vaccine was supposed to prevent those, but they never put them back in. The vaccine failed, but they never put those screening criteria back into what needs to be deemed yes or no for Lyme disease. And so that's part of it. But again, the CDC has admitted that their measure for Lyme disease is over the top. It's almost too much. You don't necessarily need to have all what they say to have it. And they, again, look for 5 specific types of Lyme disease that you need to test positive to for them to consider it. But there are 100 different types of Lyme disease in the United States. There are 300 types of Lyme disease worldwide. And so if we're only screening, say, for the vowels out of all the letters in the alphabet, and we need to find all of them, we're not doing any justice, right? So there's a big problem with that. Fourthly, like it's not looking for co-infections. So what I mentioned earlier in that I had a whole other handful of infections that I got from my tick bite. I had anaplasmosis, I had Bartonella, cytomegalovirus, I had Candida. And some of these things, like the Candida overgrowth, isn't necessarily from a tick bite, but it's because all the bad things were growing so rampantly in my system that Candida, which is an overgrowth of yeast, was allowed to go to, and that backfilled where the good bacteria and stuff was. But at any rate, so the Lyme test is only looking for Lyme. It's not looking for all of these other co-infections that people can have. So,
and it sounds like it's not even looking for all of Lyme. It's just looking
it's just a terrible, terrible thing.
And you just said you said something that I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of listeners didn't know, which is that there isn't just one Lyme disease. Just there's 100 different Lyme diseases, and they affect people differently. But we're not testing for all of those. Is there some commonality between them that a test could capture?
Well, they have adequate testing, but it just costs more money. And so if you want to get screened, you can get screened sufficiently. You just have to pay for it out of pocket. That's another part of the trouble, is that when I got to the political undertones, I kind of got off on a tangent, I suspect, but insurance doesn't always cover the costs in the treatment of Lyme disease, which is unfortunate, because what I've been explained to is partially that how far down the rabbit hole do we want to go, that this is potentially some type of biological chemical warfare that got out into the population. And so the government is trying not to have any onus or see the problem, but the insurance people are like, no, this is your problem. You started this mess and we're not cleaning it up. And so nobody wants to take the full responsibility for it, which leaves the patient the one who has to figure all of this out on their own. And so you can go to a place called IGeneX, IGENEX, IGeneX.com. It's a lab in California. It's gold standard in the Lyme community for sufficient screening. You can also there are specialized labs, but your best bet would be to get to an ILADS, an International Lyme and Associated Disease Society trained physician. They're a specialist in the tick-borne illness family, and so they will get your test, your blood work to an adequate lab facility that's specialized enough and sensitive enough to actually test you properly.
So you mentioned that there could be these political undercurrents. So as I understand it, Lyme disease initiated of all places in Lyme, Connecticut. Am I right about that? Mm-hmm. So where I grew up was on Long Island, which is across the sound from that area. So I feel like Lyme disease is something that has always been in my purview. I remember this poster in the elementary school nurse's office about Lyme disease, which was like, it was like the palm of a small child with a tick sort of sitting on it. So it's something that I've sort of been familiar with, but you're saying that this may not have been a naturally created illness. What is the basis for that?
I'll say this and that I do feel it was a naturally created illness. But supposedly, and I don't know, I'm not God, I just hear different things, right? But supposedly the amount that's found in our environment now, exponentially, it was impossible for it to be spread naturally for the amount found in our environment. Because again, I was just reading something where they said that they found a tick, caramelized in pine sap back in the Cretaceous period. So like we've known that they've been on our earth for a very long time. And I did read one study also that was talking about a guy walking through the Alps forever ago, and he was frozen, but he had Lyme. So we know that it's been out in the environment. But again, the amount that they find now and how much there is, that is what they say potentially the math just doesn't add up.
Okay. And what is the treatment for Lyme?
Well, that's a really good question too. So if you're fortunate enough to find out right away that you've been infected with Lyme disease or that you've been bit by a tick, typically speaking, 70% of people will be okay and not have any long-term problems if they treat with a doxycycline course. I would say probably want to stick closer to 4 weeks, but some people will only give you 2. But you would want to treat right away. Also, what I would recommend very much so is to get on some herbs that are going to help to boost your immune system, reduce your stress, change your diet for a little while, even if it's just temporary, to help reduce inflammation. Just give your body the best chance that it possibly can have to fight off the infection. Take probiotics, give yourself some good supplements that way, just to try to maintain your gut health. And then unfortunately, there's about 30% of those people that treat initially that go on to have more of like chronic Lyme. But then there's also that segment of the population like me who went for 7 years before you actually got a diagnosis. I've talked to people who've gone for decades and just never were able to get an answer. And the problem then is that Lyme is a corkscrew shaped organism. It's called a spirochete. It's not quite bacteria. It's not quite a virus. It's in the middle there. And the longer it goes in our bodies, the longer it has the chance to burrow into our systems, our organ systems, our cartilage, our brain. And once it's really in that deeply, it's very hard to get it out. People are doing hypothermic treatments where they're going over to Germany. I've heard about this, that they pay, God knows how much it costs, but they'll heat your body up to 106 degrees, I believe, for 4 hours to really open up your cells so that the antibiotics can then penetrate more effectively. But the person's sedated, it's very hard on your body, but Lyme doesn't like heat. So what I'm getting at is there really unfortunately is no standard treatment once it goes past the initial phase where it's in your bloodstream. People do so many different things. I can try to explain to you all the different things that I've done, but Reiki, cord cutting, salt float tanks, lymphatic massage, dry brushing, different things I rub onto the bottom of my feet, essential oils, massages down my spinal column with essential oils, hot yoga. I do that at least 5 days a week to get my body to sweat, to help to detox. I don't eat dairy, gluten, sugar. I don't drink alcohol. I don't have caffeine. I've really modified and completely changed my lifestyle. I meditate. I do my best to manage stress because that's a huge trigger for people with Lyme. Supplements, I was taking easily $900 a month on supplements. To go to see a Lyme specialist, again, that's not covered by insurance. So that's costing, it was $550 an hour to see that lady. She was a nurse practitioner. The physicians are closer to $1,200 to $1,500 an hour. And you're seeing that person every 4 to 6 weeks. So I was pretty much going broke, just trying to take care of myself and to save my own life. Gosh, what else did I do? I mean, you name it, I've tried it. Some just random different energy things, the body code, the emotional code, like all kinds of things with magnets and just stuff that people are like, okay, maybe you're a little out there, but I want my life back. I wanted to feel good again. I didn't care if people thought it was crazy. I was willing to do it, but it goes back to your original point. And sometimes like, how are regular people supposed to do this? And like, I don't know. I feel like I turned into a soldier or a machine for a period of my life. And I think about people with families. I think about with kids and stuff. Like, how are you supposed to do that? I was able to make my diet what it was. I lived and died by my phone, different alarms going off, different shifts to take different supplements and pills and do this and do that. And I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I feel lucky that I got better again. There's people who are doing IV treatments, all kinds of stuff. I'm so glad. I mean, I took antibiotics for 2.5 years. Thank God. Thank God I didn't have to do a port or the IV stuff. I passed out with needles. Like I'm just so thankful that I could get better. And that's the other thing is like, I try to figure out and understand is what makes that difference. Like, why did I get better? And some people don't. Is it underlying biological conditions that we have going on in our bodies? Like, is it the different mix of co-infections? Like, is it our gut health? What really is that trigger or that differentiating factor?
Wow, it's just shocking to hear of all the frustrations and then all the things that you have to do just to feel quote unquote normal, and to think that most people have no idea that this is what you're dealing with. And I don't say that, I say that because it's inspiring to hear what you're doing. But how could society, how could your neighbors, your friends, how could we support someone in your situation, who's going through this terrible disease?
I think a good way to support someone in this situation is just to let them know that you see them and you understand that they're not feeling well, because it's hard. It's an invisible illness. People don't see it. And that's one of the hardest parts about it. It's like, you don't look sick, and it's not like cancer where I'm going to get chemo and my hair is falling out and everybody feels bad for me and we all want to raise money and support that person. Like, it's not an illness like that, unfortunately. Although some people, I mean, I just met with a guy, his hair is falling out. He lost like 30 pounds over the course of 2 months. People thought he had cancer. They hardly recognize him because that's how the illness is impacting him. But, if you have a couple extra bucks, give it to that person, because they have a lot of money that they're putting out to try to help themselves. And that's where a lot of people fall off. Like I coach people. I do my best to guide them through the darkness, like back towards the light. And where I lose a lot of them is the cost. They can't afford it. And I can't afford to support all of them either. But like, that's one of the biggest things. Like, financially, try your best to help support that person so they can get their treatments and their supplements that they need to get their life back. But also, again, just spend some time with them. Like, don't ask them out sometimes, like just go to them, because I can remember so many people wanted to go out with me and I couldn't go. Like, I couldn't even get myself off the couch. But you can't really explain that to someone. And again, I was living in my darkest times before I knew I was sick, like before I actually had a name for it. And that's the other part where I worry for people, is like, I knew there was something really wrong with me. Towards the end, I had heart fluttering problems. I was so dizzy, just like turning my head. I could hardly walk. I mean, things started to just really plummet downhill for me. And I didn't know that I had Lyme disease. So, I mean, I just sat there and thought about killing myself so many times, to be very honest with you. I really, really thought that one through a lot. And to be alone, to go through it, it kind of made it easier to think about that thought, because I was like, no, nobody's dependent on me. I don't have anybody relying on me. I'm sure my family will miss me, but as time goes by, like, those wounds kind of heal and it'll be okay, but like, that's how desperate I was. And so if you're somebody out there and you're not feeling well, you have all these unanswered questions about your health, random weird things happen to you that don't seem to be related at all, it very well might make sense that you have a tick-borne illness and just to go get screened for that. But for the family supporting that person that has all these random weird things happening to them, just understand that they're struggling with something and just do your best to not judge them. I guess that's another thing too.
Absolutely. Where would someone locally go to get screened?
Well, I mean, you can start, what I would recommend for people is start with the standard 2-tier testing, even though it's kind of rinky-dink, because if you test positive there, you're going to save yourself a couple $100, right? Like I said, to go to IGNX to get the full panel screening is $700 or $800, I think. So start with the 2-tier testing. It's going to be your God, the name just flew out of my head. The Western blot, and it'll come to me, but the ELISA test at any rate. So you start with those 2 tests. Good news is the longer you go with it, the better chance you have of testing positive on that test. So there's one silver lining for those of you who have gone for a really long time with it in your body. You might actually get an accurate test, but if it comes back negative and you still don't feel right and you're still thinking that this is an option, then I would go down the route of having your doctor try to help you with the IGNX. If they're not willing to help you, because sometimes that's where you meet resistance, is through your physician saying that can't possibly be this and they're not going to test you for it, then you can reach out to me. I mean, I can get you in touch with an ILADS trained physician. You can look for an ILADS, that's ILADS, International Lyme and Associated Disease Society trained person, that can help you to get more adequate screening. Or again, like I said, you can try to do the IGNX on your own, but it's easier typically if you can find a physician to help you with that.
Okay. And what sort of work does the PA Lyme network that you're associated with do to support people?
So under the PA Lyme Resource Network, there are, I think, about 25 different support groups throughout our state, which is really nice. It gives people a local person to reach out to and work with if they need some assistance. They give physician referrals if somebody is looking for a more specialized doctor to help with tick-borne illness. They can refer to someone in your area. And actually, they do referrals not just in Pennsylvania. We have a pretty good network that's starting to extend through the country. And then we also do a lot of education. We have Dare to Be Aware is a tick program that we get funding through the state. It's a grant, I think it's Act 81. It's either 81 or 83. And they help us to educate not only the citizens of Pennsylvania, but also visitors, because we are the highest rate of infection state for at least 10 years now. The CDC has just increased their number of people infected to 500,000 people a year in the United States. 500,000 people, let's process that number a little better. That's way more than people with breast cancer, HIV, hepatitis, and colon cancer. I believe those 4 things combined that are being infected with Lyme and tick-borne illness every year. I really just like to drive that point home. They used to say it was closer to 45,000 people. Now they've adjusted that. And so it's just a really important time right now for people to understand more about how to stay safe from ticks, how to prevent them from coming into your backyard. Most of the time, I think people have the idea that you have to be out in the woods to come into contact with ticks. I have really big news, people. You do not have to be in the woods for ticks. Like, I get my entire property treated. I get sprayed with an organic spray to prevent ticks and mosquitoes. I have it completely open to sunlight. The grass is always trimmed. There's no willowy things or dead leafy matter hanging out. And sure enough, I have deer poop in my backyard. I live in Wyoming. I live in a pretty residential area. I've got big piles of deer poop back there now. I know that's how the ticks get there. The deer are just a taxi for the ticks. But last year I had a tick right here in my arm that I'm pretty sure came out of my own backyard. With all of that prevention that I do, I still got a tick on me, which just like blows my mind. And they're so small. They're so small.
They are, and they're insidious. We live in Wyoming as well, and we get our yard treated because I've had them literally fall out of a tree and land on someone. And it's not as a rural location. It's just they're everywhere. And you just there was one time I had to pull one off my dog's nose. He was not so happy with me about that. But you just have to be careful out there.
That's right.
But so if anyone is is out there and thinking, maybe I have Lyme disease, or they have a loved one that has Lyme disease, what's the best way to get connected with the PA Lyme Resource Network or with you?
You can look me up online, or you can do the same with the PA Lyme Resource Network. Their website is palyme.org. And so feel free to go on there and just put in for more information, and someone will contact you and get you situated with somebody close to you. If you're from Pittsburgh, for example, we'll put you with somebody from Pittsburgh, not necessarily with me, because I'm more here in Berks County. But there are people throughout the state that they would help you to get connected to. And then you can always reach out to me. I have no troubles with that. A lot of people do that on Facebook. I'm under my own name. It's Anne Desjardins. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm now on TikTok doing my TikToks. So feel free to look for me there. And I've got a YouTube channel too, because something else that I've done now is I'm all but finished with my studies to become an Ayurvedic practitioner. And Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old holistic medicine system. And so I felt that it was really sensible for me, with the number of sick people I do talk with, to have a little bit more formal training. And given my love for herbs and how much I felt that they helped me. And also Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga, which I love very much so. It just seemed to make sense for me to study Ayurveda. But I put out videos just on general health topics as well, because I feel the more that we can do to prevent things from going wrong in the first place will prevent things obviously from happening later. And for me, my own journey, again, my spirit was very sick before I became so physically sick. And I just try my best to help people to understand those correlations between our emotions and our body and how that impact can either be beneficial or to the detriment.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know I've learned a lot in our brief time talking here this morning, and I'm sure that our listeners have as well. So again, Anne, thank you for being here today, and I hope to catch to our listeners. I'll catch you next time on Not Minding My Own Business.
Yes, thank you very much, Russell. I appreciate your interest in this and helping me get the word out there.